So, hi everyone. Welcome to part 2 of our executive workshop series with Zappos. We are doing leadership through organizational sciences. For this part, we'll be focusing on behavioral impacts at the team level. Last time we did the company and the market level. And we'll focus on using emotional intelligence, EQ, analytics, and we'll learn how to connect the importance of this concept with an organization, as team dynamics have heavily affected a person's expectations and the ability to maintain creativity as an organization scales. Before we jump in though, as a reminder, I'm Ashley Grant, your Director of Experiences. I'm along with my colleague, Corey Jones, and we'll be co-hosting this and just making sure that everything runs smoothly. Should you have any questions outside of the content, feel free to ping one of us directly. Pravir Malik, PhD, is the head of organizational sciences. He's from Zappos family of companies, and he leads their organizational sciences consulting group, actually. And he'll be our workshop host. So for a comprehensive experience, there should be many of you guys who attended the part 1. This time we will be doing part 2. And we would like for you to attend the part 3 as well. For the certificate, a quick agenda. We'll go down through the team behaviors, and then we'll go through the executive workshop and the Q&A session with Pravir. And we just ask that you remain on mute until requested by the host. Type any questions or relevant comments in the chat, and just limit distractions from the information being provided, and keep speaking opportunities brief and respectful. Now let's begin. Pravir, I'd like to, yes.
Yeah, hi, Ashley. Would you like me to share slides here? Or?
Absolutely. So Pravir's going to get into the meat of the conversation now, and he'll be sharing his screen. You should be able to now, Pravir.
Okay, cool. Thank you. All right. Let's see. So the reality check, you do see the PowerPoint? Awesome. All right. Great. Well, welcome everyone. And we're going to be focusing today on the team level. And I think hopefully many of you were here 2 weeks ago, and the overall framework for our organizational sciences pillars really it's fourfold. And the last time we met, we had gone over the organizational level and the market level services. And as a quick recap, the basic premise is that we exist in a system or a market that's continually changing. And so traditional planning tools, it becomes very difficult to plan with traditional planning tools. And so we had suggested the use of modeling and simulations to begin to test the market out and run different experiments. And with the idea that we exist in this complex adaptive system, that kind of pushes a different pressure into the organization to also be able to adapt or flex itself much more easily. And so we very briefly discussed also at the organizational level, what we need to do differently. And one of the models that we focused on was the fourfold analytics model, which really highlighted a common pattern of sustainability that existed at many different levels of complexity in complex adaptive systems in general, starting from nature, then going into complex organizations, and then even looking at the society levels. And there was a common pattern. And today, what we're going to focus on is driving that need for flexibility further and getting into this hinge of the team, and why really the team is a critical component in building this real-time flexibility that any organization should ideally be equipped with. So as a brief reminder, what I had suggested the last time is that if we think about sustainability of complex adaptive systems, then one of the key dynamics that really drives that sustainability is the simultaneous existence of two scales. So we have what we would call the sublinear scale, which is as an organization gets bigger, it requires less energy to do the same amount of work if it's working well. And then on the flip side, we have a superlinear scale, which suggests that as an organization gets bigger, then because of the diversity and the organic interactions, then innovation can increase at a rate that's higher than linear. So it's a superlinear scaling. And really what drives sustainability is, in a sense, this differential between the sublinear and superlinear scale. So on this graph here, you'll see on the x-axis size, meaning that as an organization gets bigger, then we would expect that it can become more sustainable so long as it's leveraging the superlinear and sublinear scale, and that differential is growing efficiently. One of the big problems, however, is that in both looking at superlinear scaling and sublinear scaling, there's different kinds of inefficiencies that creep in very easily. So if we think about superlinear scaling, and that's that ability of an organization to innovate in real time, then some kinds of disorganization that creep in, we know as groupthink, for instance. It's very easy for an organization to rely on um, a common point of view. So or people might gravitate towards a common point of view, and that is that phenomena of groupthink. Or on the flip side, it's also very easy for an organization to continue to habitually use what made it successful in the past. And so these are typical disorganizations that creep in on the superlinear side. And on the sublinear side, so as an organization gets bigger, hopefully it's economies of scale that are really driving efficiencies. But very often what happens is that there's fragmentation. So just imagine as your organization gets bigger, there might be the same software that's used in different areas, or there might be 2 or 3 different IT efforts. And so there's repeated work being done. So there's this fragmentation that exists. And then also there's this natural phenomena of waste that also arises due to that. So these are typical disorganizations or inefficiencies that accompany both the advantages that can be gained from superlinear scaling and sublinear scaling. And the real question is, how do we maintain these two advantages so that an organization can continue to be sustainable no matter how large it's getting? This notion of disorganization, however, is very common, and the common word for it is entropy. And that's borrowed from the physical sciences, from the chemical sciences, but it's this tendency of organization easily getting disorganized. And what I want to propose is that the way that a team functions and the maturity of the unit of the team is critical in managing the disorganization and this notion of entropy. So different categories of emotional intelligence, and we're going to see this very practically, and also we'll have the chance to interact a lot more in a few minutes based on this. But the different categories of emotional intelligence, just as a quick review, first is self-awareness. Is a person aware of the emotions or the different states of being that they're experiencing in real time? So that gives rise to the second level of complexity in emotional intelligence, which is self-regulation. Once we become aware that, for example, we're experiencing frustration or anger, then it becomes easier to self-regulate ourselves so that we can experience less of it. So we become aware of anger and we can do something to reduce that. The third thing is motivation. So this means that once we become aware of ourselves, so the more emotionally intelligent we get, we don't necessarily need extrinsic motivation to do things. but our source of motivation can be intrinsic. So we can, for example, create a state of happiness in ourselves, or joy, or calm, and that can motivate us to do something. The fourth level of emotional intelligence is empathy, where once we've become aware of what's going on in ourselves, it's easier to also read others and understand what might be going on with others in a meeting or in a room that we're in. And then finally is this notion of EQ really augmenting social skills, because once you have empathy, then the next kind of level of maturity in emotional intelligence is to make social skills happen at a different level altogether. And so um, it in some very brief simulations we've done, and we've for the last couple of years at Zappos, um, there's been up to about 50 different teams that have used the software tool, and I'm going to show you how a little bit about that software tool as well. And we measure something that we call entropy, which is the level of disorganization. And in simulations that we've conducted, we see that if an organization has high entropy, which is kind of designated by this blue line here, then its relative business impact tends to be, a business will not do as well, basically financially, or from a business point of view, if its entropy is high. And if its entropy is lower, then it'll relatively do much better. And so that's part of the reason why we feel that working with teams and building these emotional intelligence skills are really important, because they can change the game for an organization from a business point of view. Oh, yeah.
So Pravir, how do you and your team help leaders make team members aware and in tune with the different categories that you just went over, the
Yes,
self-awareness and the self-regulation and so on?
yes, absolutely. So I'd like to switch and just give a quick demo of the tool that we use. That'll make it very concrete. And then, and then that'll also address the question that you bring up, Ashley. Okay, so I'm going to just stop sharing. I'm going to switch my sharing here. So just give me a second. All right, I'm almost there. Okay, great. So hopefully you can see this emotional intelligence builder screen. Reality check. Okay, awesome. Okay, so this is a tool that we use internally, and there's what you'll see here is I'm just going to focus on a little bit of the functionality. So one is what's called the entry module, and here this is, imagine a team of say 5 to 12 to 15 people, and everybody has access to that same team login and ID. So if there are 5 people in a team, you don't necessarily know who's entering in what, but the entry is where a person will kind of state what they're feeling. And then the review module, which I'll walk over in just a sec, is where a team will collectively review all the entries made and then decide what action to take. The sentiment summary is where you can see what's happening in the team as a whole, and the real-time mirror will give insight into some organizational metrics that are calculated in real time, including the overall entropy of a team. So let me just quickly go over some of this. So actually, if I may use you as a test case, here.
Of course.
Yeah, so there's this little teaser wheel here, which oftentimes when a person, for example, at the end of a meeting, we may take 5 minutes at the end of a meeting and ask everybody to log into this tool and just enter in what they're feeling. So, what might you be feeling right now, Ashley? Let me enter that in.
I'm feeling thankful.
Okay. So I'm going to enter in thankful, and you can see that there was a match. So this software recognizes about 500 different states of being, and it's matched thankful to this broad family of gratitude. Now, suppose, for instance, it didn't recognize something, then what it's going to do is it's going to default, it's going to ask me a few additional questions to try and pinpoint what I might be feeling. So suppose it didn't recognize, suppose I had put in a question mark or something didn't recognize, then it's going to ask me, okay, where are you feeling this? And then I can say in the mind or in the body or in the heart or gut. And if I choose heart or gut, it's going to give me some starter states that I might be experiencing. And if I say anger, and then it's going to ask me intensity and duration and so on. But in this case, Ashley said thankful, so it matched to the family of gratitude. And so on a scale of 1 to 10, where might that thankfulness be? 1 being low and 10 being high.
Let's go with 8.
8, okay, awesome. And the duration, is that just a few minutes? Is it like lasting for maybe a couple of hours, or is it kind of persistent where you feel this day after day?
I'd say in the middle.
Okay, a few hours. And essentially, what needs to be, there'll be some more questions that are generated, but the ones with the asterisks are what needs to be answered. So is this issue of thankfulness, is it what you're feeling, is it work related or not?
No.
Okay, so it's just more
No, actually,
personal.
yes. Sorry.
Oh, it is.
Go with
Okay.
yes, right?
All right.
Thankful to still be employed.
Okay. But the thing is that the reason why the software asks this, because things like the intensity, duration, is it work related, it's going to treat them differently, which I'll show you in a few minutes. It'll use it differently to create those organizational metrics. And what's driving that feeling? So this is the last kind of mandatory thing you need to answer. What's driving this thankfulness?
I guess COVID, right? I'm thankful for my health, thankful for my job.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll just say for health, for job. And I'm just going to add the entry. Okay, so it's added in. And now, imagine you've got a team of like 5 to 12, 15 people, and everybody's entering in stuff. And then you go to review, and this is a team view. So this is where the team as a whole can see what everybody has entered in collectively. You don't know who's entered in what. And you'll notice that's color coded. So the blue is what's picked up from the previous screen, where you stated, what you were feeling, and why you were feeling this. Yes, so actually this is the second one over here. And then the green one is the editable columns. So for example, suppose that, imagine a team is reviewing this and they can click on any cell. So for example, there's one entry which was somebody felt anger because of poor team communication. So the team can brainstorm, okay, how do we increase or improve team communication? And let me just say, for example, like clear protocols specified. And I'll submit that. It'll just save it, and I can fill up. For example, like, okay, so who's empowered to solve that? Is it me? Is it we as a team? Is it leadership? Is it others? So I'll just say, we as a team, and submit that. But this is how the team can collectively review and then add in info. And then if we look at sentiment summary real quick, it refreshes this every day, and it takes the most recent 30 days of data. So here, and it just kind of creates an overall pattern for what's going on with the team. So we can see like there's anger, but there's also some gratitude and joy, and then in the mind there's like some degree of we can just say there's different things that are going on that aren't kind of connected, and there's also calmness. So you can get a quick sense of what's going on with the team overall. And then also you can you can see different kinds of analysis that are automatically generated. So I'm going to look at own team overview. And the idea here is that the team has an immediate kind of lens into what's going on with it and how its patterns are changing from week to week. And this is in real time. And so it becomes like a method of self-facilitation for a team. And really quickly, to just give you an idea, there's like 6 different categories of analysis that go on. And here there were 204 data points. And what the software does is that it breaks it up into 2 halves. So you see the pink is the first half and the blue is the second half. And this is the 0 line. So what it's saying is that overall, the team in the first half was very positive. In the second half, it became negative. And so the trend is overall negative for the team. But then you can specifically see where these trends are being kind of pushed from. So, it could be that, so in the body, stuff like fatigue and tiredness, or just weakness in the body and things, you can see that it's kind of trending positively. And a hypothesis is that, okay, since we're working from home, potentially there's less wear and tear on the body. And then here, the heart and gut, you can see that it's trending negatively. So maybe people are just feeling more anxious about stuff, or more stressed. And then specifically, you can see stuff that might be happening in the mind, and also it's trending negatively. So you get a quick snapshot of how things are shifting from one time period to the next. And then what the software also does is that based on the patterns, it'll just compute real quick the level of development. And there's something called Tuckman's model of team development that we've used as a basis for this. Ashley, was there something?
Yeah, really quickly, someone had a question that I think is
Okay.
relevant right now. So Amina asked, are there external factors such as the pandemic, the economy, that may have an impact on this model?
Absolutely. So for example, the way that would get kind of reflected is that, if I go back to the entry screen, then when somebody says, why they're feeling a certain way, suppose they feel sad or anger or fear or whatever they feel, then you'll say, it's kind of like external factors. So you'll just specify what it is that's driving your feeling, and then that's going to show up in the review, and it's going to drive some of the analysis, because the software automatically scans for certain words. So you already know, you get a sense for what's being driven externally and what's kind of happening internally. So absolutely, yes.
Yeah, and it also goes, and I had a similar question for Pravir when we were going through this together prior to our event today. And I had asked, how does it affect, how do external factors affect, just the, like you said, the model or the tool? And I believe, Pravir, your answer was that when they answer that bubble of, okay, why do you feel this way? Do you feel this way because of work, or, outside of work? And then you had mentioned that they're weighted differently, right? And they affect the organization differently.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So it's weighted differently if it's something that's kind of external to work, and if it's internal to work. And then also, when you enter in why you're feeling something, those words are all accumulated and aggregated by different words. So you can then see, trends that pop up. So here, based on what's happening, the software will just compute, what stage the team is at. And just as a quick overview, forming is where, team it usually happens with a newly formed team where everyone's very polite, but nobody really says what's happening. That's forming. Storming is where the team gets really honest, and everything comes up to the surface, but the team doesn't necessarily know how to deal with conflict or with negative stuff. Norming is where a team can effectively change negative patterns into positive patterns, and that usually requires experience. And then the performing is where not only the team changes negative to positive, but also they're generally very enthused about everything that they're doing. And so you get a quick sense of where the team might be at. And then, really quick, I'm not going to go through all these, but just these are computed in real time as well. To give you an idea, the collective dynamic score it's looking specifically as how well the team changes negative to positive patterns. and anything in red means that the team needs to work pretty hard at it. And another one is like solution index. So if you recall when we went to review, I'll just flip back to review here, but in review, there is this column for solutions. So if there's a negative thing that's pointed out and there's no solution that the team comes up with, then it's going to decrease the solution index score. And so we're going to see something that's lower than it should be. And so that's what really is going on with the solution index. It's telling you whether the team is thinking of constructive solutions. And then the empowerment index is where a team feels that it's able to resolve a problem themselves as opposed to requiring somebody else to resolve it. And again, that's just, it's something that we just want to get a sense of as to, if the whole empowerment index for the whole organization is becoming lower, then it's something that we need to become aware of, that all teams feel that they need to rely on something else to solve problems. And then entropy is a summary metric that really takes everything else and comes up with, okay, how disorganized or organized is this team? And you want this score to be lower. And basically, if just to give you an example, if collective dynamic score is low, then entropy is going to be higher. If the solution index is low, then entropy is going to be higher. If empowerment is low, then entropy is going to be higher. So there's like an inverse proportionality there. And then, the other thing is that so at Zappos, there's like 10 core values. And so the software will scan for words that are related to these 10 core values that people are entering in. And then it will just create a correlation of positive versus negative impacts on the core values. So then we know, how well core values might be working in an organization. So here, when we look at positive core value index, you can see a really high score. And then, there's customized guidance, based on the metrics and what's red versus green. The software will try and push the team to change the red into green so that they can take action themselves. So there's specific kind of recommendations that will come up based on the scores that a team themselves have. Let me just pause there real quick before I show a couple of more things. How are we doing, Ashley? Any more questions or?
Yeah, so someone asked to see the core values report.
Okay. Yeah, so if I go back.
And by the way, everyone, and would that be available in the link that we have for them, Prabir?
So the core values, no, not necessarily, because, but we can, depending on what the specific question is, we can follow up adequately with whoever raised that. So
okay,
yeah.
Then we also have someone had asked, do you profile pessimism from being realistic and external factors? So Shlomo, would you mind just?
Yeah, sure. So like if people are the one driving the data entry, what essentially happens is your overall mental state influences what is reality for you. So when you're filling it in, you might be like, I hate this job. This guy's an asshole. Sorry, didn't mean to swear. It's just the perspective of someone who's having a mental state that's not positive. They'll put in a very negative approach, but the pressures aren't real. So how do you distinguish technically a personality disorder that came out of external factors? COVID has affected us all. To, is my organization actually functioning more poorly, or is this person coping very poorly? So you do measure coping and then mental state and then attribute the measures to, is it their current state, or is it just their current persona of I'm very upset with how everything's going?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Shlomo. So I think that what it really drives down to is that there's no kind of categorization of the kind that you're talking about, but really what this tool is meant to be, it's meant to be like action oriented. So imagine if like you see a lot of instances in this overall review screen where there's I hate this job, I hate this person, this project is useless. You see a lot of that, and there's a lot of anger, and there's a lot of like frustration and fear that's showing up here. Then the whole point is that the team's got to get together and really figure out, okay, how are we going to solve this stuff? so the reality that we're experiencing as a team, what can we do to shift it? And that really is the
Got
emphasis
it.
of that, and that's
So
what
you
this.
exclude outliers. It's basically saying
Yeah.
if there's commonality of a negative situation, then that's your normalizer is negative.
Yeah, but then also, what really this software is doing is that it wants to see how the patterns are changing from negative to positive, and that becomes like a self motivation for the team because they have access to these metrics all the time. And if I'll go to another view here, where there's a whole I can pull up all the different dashboards for all the teams in a particular part of the organization. This will take a few seconds to pull up. But if imagine you're in a part of the organization, say tech, then the people who kind of oversee tech can look for common trends and then address as a whole that, okay, what do we need to do differently if the teams are all experiencing negative stuff, what do we need to do systematically to change this? But the point is that it's all coming up in real time. It's not like a survey that's sent out like every quarter or 6 months. It's real time. So as people enter in stuff, right away you have everything that pops up. And so here this is an example of a dashboard where you can compare teams. I can look at organizational metrics for one team and then compare it to another, and just
Yeah.
go to this.
So Prabir, someone else asked, so to I guess hone in on the timing of things, people are asking, well, how often do you, if it's not quarterly, how often do you track these trends? How often should the team be reporting these? And I also had these questions for you when we spoke.
Yeah.
Do you, and then you had mentioned meetings, you had mentioned there's a different variety of ways you can go about it.
Yeah.
But yeah, can you share that with everyone?
Yes, and so the point of this is, what we found as a best practice is that it's at least once a week. So if a meeting happens once a week, or a team meets once a week, ideally you take like a few minutes at the beginning of a meeting or at the end of a meeting. Everybody gets into this software and just states what's going on for them, and then you pull it up and you can address it as a team in real time. Or you send out a reminder like once a week or twice a week, just spend like 5 to 10 minutes, get into this tool and just record what's going on for you. And then those trends can become available for everyone to see in real time. And if it's done in that way, it becomes much more real for people. And then one of the potential advantages of self recording is always that if somebody has anger or if somebody has fear, the very act of recording it begins to separate that person from the feeling of anger or fear. And so there's then that feeling can get reduced as a result of the separation, because many times it's when we get absorbed by something that it becomes all encompassing, and that becomes the kind of general feeling of what's going on. But a tool like this allows that kind of self-reflection and separation, to the probability of that to increase. And that's something that we want to look for.
Then we also have, so outside of the, how often, someone said, what about how the teams are structured? So when you are, Danielle Moody, she asked, when you are grouping and doing these evaluations, is it by project or by skill set or expertise? I mean, I remember you and I spoke about that as well when we were talking about, like, when you're giving out these tools, and you talked about a weekly meeting. Well, is that a weekly meeting only with your team? Is that like a all hands on deck meeting? Does it matter?
Yeah, so the answer is flexible, but certainly it's focused on some kind of unit of work, meaning that it could be a team or it could be a whole area of a company. So everyone, one of the kind of simple things is that you can create like on the fly, like specific quote unquote accounts. So you imagine you create a team account that everybody in that team has access to, or you can create a division account that everybody in the division has access to, and then people can, for a certain window of time, enter in whatever they want, and so that that real-time feedback is kind of like reflected, all the analysis is done in real time, and then you can see what's going on within that team or within the division, but in real time. So that's part of like what the point, because remember, the reason why this is being done is to help an organization operate more like a complex adaptive system. That's really the goal here is, we're in adaptive markets. We can't necessarily predict what's going to go on. And part of what creates innate flexibility is the ability of the team to process dysfunction and process negativity more quickly so that they can get out of it and become more present to what's going on either in the organization or externally. And so the tool like this is just a means to try and get to that level of flexibility that's required in a system that's continually changing. So this is just an example of an approach or a methodology to help to get to that level of flexibility that you want to see in the organization as a whole. We all know that even personally, if we get stuck in a negative emotion, then we can be there for a long time, and it totally filters how we're experiencing everything. And then we kind of lose contact with what's really happening because we're seeing it through a filter of some kind of negativity. So the point of this is just to be able to break those filters, move them more quickly, process them as a team or as an individual, so that we can begin to see more clearly and be responsive to what's happening in the broader kind of arena that we're in, either as an organization as a whole or the market as a whole.
Yeah, and in regards to the market, we have a really great question from Ellen. In the last session, you talked about testing or modeling values for the organization or market. How does that tie in and reflect in the core values on the team level?
Yes, and absolutely. So for example, here there's, let me just go back to the entry screen and then I'm going to walk through. So in the entry, you've got this box, okay, what are you feeling? And here, people can write as short or as long of an answer of what's going on. They can, yeah, sorry. So, if I say, for example, anger, and then I go to just put in these levels here, and it's work related. And in this root cause of feeling, they can put in as long or short of an answer as they want. And this is going to correlate to core values because people are going to use words that are then going to link to the core values of a company. So, imagine that somebody says, okay, it's very difficult to make change happen, or every time I try to do something on my project, it fails. So now what's going to happen is that if I go back to this real-time mirror, and if I go to own team overview, so people have entered in certain words, and I look at core value correlation, then we already know what our core values are. And this is just a view for core values that are Zappos. But for any company, there's like very specific core values. So the software is going to look for words that correlate to these core values. So if somebody said, it's very difficult to make change happen, nothing ever works out, then it'll get linked to this embrace and drive change, for instance, because the software is looking for words related to embrace and drive change. And so it's going to go in as a negative correlation to embrace and drive change. And then, so it's already linking to core values. So you have a sense for how well or not core values are working in a particular team or in a particular area of the company. But it all relies on the input that's put in. So in the entry screen, if somebody is pretty specific about why they're feeling a certain way, then the chances that it can be related to a core value negatively or positively are much higher.
Yeah, so I think that she meant, so and Ellen, feel free to jump in here, but Pravir, I think that maybe you can, because you showed me this, if you could show everyone how it correlates. So she was mentioning like how it correlates to the organization in the market, right? Or vice versa. So can you show how it affects like the bottom line, like the organization's bottom line? Because I remember you saying that like when emotions are low or, you know, entropy is high within an organization, you know, they're like the business overall is affected. So Ellen, feel free to jump in here.
Yeah. So what happens? So here in this particular case, like you know, if you go to organizational metrics, then there's an overall entropy score that's created. So if I go here, then the software is creating an entropy score, and then I can get this entropy score, you know, for the company as a whole. So if I go back to, you know, real-time mirror, and so I can get an entropy score for a business unit or a division or a company. Let me just click on company. This is going to take a few seconds to calculate. So this is a sandbox environment. You know, I've created a bunch of fictitious teams and just set it up. It'll take like probably 7 to 8 seconds to pull up the overall entropy score for the company. And so when I go to organizational metrics, I can see that the entropy for the organization as a whole, which has like a whole bunch of teams in it, and it takes the most recent 4,500 data points. And so it's calculating entropy based on the most recent 4,500 data points. And it's coming up with a summary entropy score of 94.77, which is very, very high. And then what that's going to, we've run simulations to kind of suggest the level of entropy and how it's going to impact you know, business in general. And so then you can see the correlation that the lower the entropy, the more positively business is going to do, and the higher the entropy, if it continues for a particular time period, then it's going to impact the overall business revenues or your market share, you know, much more tangibly. And so there's different ways to compute that, but we did it through running some simulations and just getting a sense for how entropy relates to business metrics in general. So, and that's the slide that, you know, before we jumped into this, I had just shown a slide back in the PowerPoint of how lower entropy generally creates higher relative financial performance.
Thank you. And okay, so Janan asked, how do you address the problem of groupthink? So this is going a little bit further back, but yeah, how do you address the problem of groupthink? It may not be about feelings, but suppression or culture not allowing honest feelings to be safely expressed.
Yeah, you know, it's a really tough, I think it's a great question, and it really gets to the heart of a lot of what this is about. And, you know, part of the groupthink is, you know, if all a team is thinking in a particular way, then whatever that trend is, it's going to get magnified. So you're going to see the same pattern repeating itself. So, you know, if I go back to this trend graph, you know, for instance, you're going to see like this trend always being on the same side of the zero line, you know, and you're going to see it kind of like show up kind of consistently or deteriorate, or, you know, always have the same pattern that it had before. And so that's how you can begin to become aware that you might be experiencing groupthink. Now, suppose, you know, this blue was the same kind of level as the pink over here, and this continued to the next time frame, then it kind of generates a hypothesis that maybe this team is kind of experiencing groupthink. And then you've got to investigate further to just dive into it. Or, you know, if the team reports up to a division and you're seeing that the whole division has the same pattern, then it's got to be elevated up to the company level. But you know, it's about reading the data in a particular way to just see what the clues are, to try and see if something is a groupthink phenomena or not. You know, so let me just to emphasize that point. You know, this thing of comparative entropy. You know, here, you know, we've got 4 axes. You know, we've got the team axis here, and then you've got the business unit axis, you got a division axis, and you got a company axis. And this is a really, this is a reality check, because, what will happen? Suppose, you want the entropy to be low, so you want it to be in the green zone. And suppose, here you see the entropy is really high. It's red, and it's way off. But the question is, what's happening with the rest of the company? So the business unit, if it's also high, the division is also high, the company is also high, then it might be like a systemic issue that's going on. It might be a massive groupthink that's going on. And so that's a different, but at least you can become aware of what it might be. So this is just a reality check. On the flip side, suppose, this was in green, the division was in green, business unit was in green, company was in green, and this was in red, then that's a whole different ballgame, because you know that whatever's happening with the team is just specific to the team. It's not something that extends beyond the team. And so it's like, it's a reality check, so then you can see how other teams are doing in that same business unit, and then you can share best practices to kind of break out of groupthink and stuff like that. So
thanks, Prabir. So I'd like to use this last 10 minutes to give people some voices, and instead of continuing to put their questions or comments in the chat, if you could raise your hands if you have something to say or a question to ask Prabir, now's the time, and I'll call up on you. Daniela.
Thanks, Ashley, and Prabir, again, thank you for a very insightful and challenging, I should say, presentation. The question is, how, so this doesn't seem to actually, I see that there's a sandbox. There seemed to be an indication of a hierarchical team structure of a team, business unit, to division, company. How would this tool adapt or suggest perhaps better team dynamic or better team pairing? Because one individual may be totally not working with one team, but may do really well in a different team. So is there a way to break it down to individual level and reshuffle teams to say recalculate scores?
No, not in this. I think that's a great question, but no, this software is designed to just operate at a team level. So the whole idea is that if there are self-reported behaviors that have to do with that show dysfunction in a team, or that there's a pattern of dysfunction in a team, then the real emphasis of this is, how as a team, as a whole, can we try and address that? But it won't isolate an individual. It won't try and kind of match up the individual with another team, which I think is a whole different problem area and a very relevant one, but it's not addressed by this what I just shared with you today. Thank you.
Thanks, Daniela. Before we move on to Shlomo, I do want to address Vila's question, and he asks, do we get access to this tool? So Prabir's been gracious enough to actually provide us with basically like a dummy sneak peek to the tool, and I'll be providing that link as well as the user password information to you guys. And Prabir, if they don't, so yes, his company does offer this. This is what they do. They are a consulting group. If you know Zappos, you know that their reputation with their team and their organizational sciences and their customer service and beyond is top tier. So this is something that they have begun to do externally for companies. So yes, you can definitely have that conversation, and I'll provide you guys with information afterwards. And if you don't have a tool like this, Prabir, what are some things that people can do with their teams to track this type of stuff?
Sure. So I think that there's some very simple things, but for example, if there's a shared spreadsheet that a team has access to, and then, provided there's a way to ensure anonymity, especially in the beginning, people can begin to just enter in, what they're feeling and why they're feeling it into a spreadsheet, and that can be available to the whole team. And then the team can kind of review it as a team and just figure out, okay, what do we do different? So that's one approach. The second is for people to just write on a piece of paper in a team meeting and just submit it into a box, and then people kind of pull it up and just say, okay, someone said frustrated because of this, so how do we address this? So there's simple ways to do it. And then, just going back to what you said, the software itself, since we are externally offering it, there's some very it's offered very, very, reasonably financially. So if anybody's interested, they should, definitely, Ashley's going to give you contact info, but you should reach out to me and we can have the discussion as well. So.
Okay, Shlomo, we're ready for you.
I don't know about that, but I'll give it a shot anyways. So my thought would be, if I'm using this and the business does decide to take action based on the current state, do you turn this into a timeline where you can flag, I've implemented change and how much I spent on that? So you track the business's effort and the outcome of that effort, so then you can create a repository of what works. Are you allowing businesses to do that, or is this more of just continuous check, continuous verification, or does it also measure, the efficacy of a choice we made and the amount we spent on it?
Yes, it does. It doesn't measure the amount you spent on it, but what it will do is the efficacy of any change. And I didn't have time to go into that, but there's a whole set of functionality in that console that I briefly showed. But you can actually track that you made a change, say at X time, at this part of the company. So what are the before and after patterns? How did the pattern shift? 1 month before, 1 month later, or 2 months before, 2 months later. Exactly.
I mean, data is great, but unless you can influence it and measure the influence,
Yeah.
then you're not going to improve.
Yeah, exactly.
Thanks, Shlomo. Any other questions? Let's see, did I miss anything in the chat? What are downstream impacts? Does your proprietary software provide recommendations relative to designing solutions? It's kind of similar to what Shlomo was saying. For example, negative feelings could lead to low morale, low sales, competitive gain, retribution, etc.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so, as of now, it's beyond looking at how patterns might change and looking for keywords and how keywords might change. There's not specifically that functionality in there, but there's simulations that can be performed to take metrics out of this and correlate them to what's happening with morale in general, or with engagement in general, or with the financial metrics in general. So there's different correlations that can be simulated. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Anyone else? Alrighty. So just as a really quick recap, or I guess takeaways, right? The takeaways that Prabir came up with, and yes, we will be providing the slide deck that was shared today, and it has additional information in there as well that Prabir didn't even get to. So we will be sharing that slide deck, and I won't even go through the takeaways, so it'll be right in the slide deck. And we'll also have a resources page as far as the link to the emotional builder that you saw on Prabir's screen today, and with the username and password that'll be available for a limited time. And if you are interested in implementing this with your team or clients, even I saw someone had a really great comment about clientele, and if you or you've seen people use this with their clients to potentially track how a client relationship is going, that was a really great one too.
I'm sorry, actually, just one point. So actually, the software that everybody will have access to, I just want to point out it has a subset of functionality. It won't have the full set of functionality, but it'll have a few things so people can get a taste for it. So.
Right. Okay. All right. So I think that's all, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. And if you do have any other questions or suggestions in terms of what we should cover a little bit deeper into, perhaps in part 3, we'll be moving into the individual, but I'm sure that we could probably do a quick recap of this to start. So if you have anything to share with us, please do. I'll be sending out a thank you email with a a survey with the slides, and with some great information, like I said, for the emotional builder. And we are looking forward to seeing you in 2 weeks to wrap up this series for part 3. Thank you so much. Have a great day.